This week on the Powell Not Found podcast, we're talking pitching injuries that are consuming baseball, Josh Donaldson is retiring, and Billy Joel's new video for his song Turn the Lights Back On coming up next on episode 10 of the Powell Not Found podcast. Let's go!
I'm gonna tell you a story about a girl who loves gin. A national pandemic seized her birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming, we tried not to tell her. She brewed some Irish breakfast tea. She knew her birthday was getting corona.
Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 10 of the Powell Not Found podcast. I'm your host, Mark Powell. We got a pretty good show for you, a short and sweet one here on March 10th, 2024. Happy Mario Day, everybody. Actually, just before we started recording here, Nintendo decided to announce their festivities for Mario Day. Mario Day, if you don't know, is March 10th. If you actually look at it visually, it looks like it spells out the word Mario. So Nintendo has decided to take it on as a national holiday for their mainstream character, which is cute. It's a cute little marketing scheme that they've done. But they just announced a couple new things that are coming to their Nintendo Switch Online, Dr. Mario, Mario Golf, Mario Tennis, these old Game Boy games that came out. And they also cryptically announced that they're working on a new movie for Super Mario Brothers, or in the world of Super Mario Brothers, but didn't specifically say, let me fade here, didn't specifically say that they were working on Super Mario Brothers 2 or the Mario movie 2, even though that movie did incredibly well. I think it's pretty much assumed that there's going to be a sequel to that movie coming out. But they kind of cryptically announced it, and I'm not sure whether that means they're going to make a spin-off. They said, obviously they're working on a new animated film based on the world of Super Mario Brothers, which you would just assume that if it's Mario Brothers 2, they would come out and just say it, but they always tend to not release as much information as they probably should. But maybe they're working on a spin-off. Maybe this isn't Super Mario Brothers 2. Maybe they're working on something that's going to look a little bit different than what they're used to. Maybe they're working on a Donkey Kong film or something like that. Maybe they're just trying to stretch their horizons a little bit. They're working with the same team, the Illumination team that worked on that movie. And I don't know, maybe they're a little bit gun-shy saying Super Mario Brothers 2, the sequel, considering that movie, even though it was great, got kind of harsh reviews from people saying it wasn't everything that they expected. It wasn't groundbreaking, and I don't know. Maybe it just hit me differently. I had a great time watching that movie, especially considering if you look at the history of video game adaptations to movies, it's a very, very good adaptation. It's short. I think that whole movie came in at 87 minutes. Which is really nice compared to some movies like Killers of the Flower Moon, which I believe the total runtime is about 8 days of Leonardo DiCaprio. I think Scorsese needs to kind of cut it down a little bit. And movies like Once a Time in Hollywood or the Irishman, Gods and Generals way back when, which actually had an intermission. I went to go see that movie when I was younger. The movie, literally, the theater, and I can't tell if every theater at that point had this placed in it, but I remember it was the only movie that I've ever seen that had a built-in intermission as if you were going to a Broadway show because it was so long. And I think the theatrical release was 3 hours, 30 minutes, 3 hours, 40 minutes. So they had to build in that break. And I've never seen that since. I don't know if Killers of the Flower Moon had that as well in theaters. I didn't see it in theaters. I haven't seen the whole movie through anyways, considering it takes you 8 days. But I've never seen that since. I've never seen any other movie utilize that tactic. It was a good tactic. It made you feel like the whole day was dedicated to the film. It made you feel like you were kind of going to a Broadway show. But still, at that point, when you're building in intermissions for people to see it in theaters, you may want to revisit a second edit pass on that film. It might be a little bit too long. And all these movies are now getting to the point where 3 hours and 30 minutes, I feel like it starts to become a burden. So the shortness, the brevity of the Super Mario Brothers movie at 87 minutes, loved it. Felt like it didn't take up the whole day to watch it, even though it was filled and packed with Easter eggs. And they're, again, I am the market that they're pointing to. I was very, very young when Super Mario World came out. I played that game on the Super Nintendo. It was not part of the original Mario craze because I didn't exist on the Earth yet. But I am the children they are targeting there with this movie, with some of those Easter eggs that they have. You start seeing generations of Mario tidbits in that movie, and the music, it just calls to your heart. And maybe that doesn't play the same with kids now because Mario is just one thing that they can play as opposed to the millions of different options. But man, did that movie play to my heartstrings a lot. I loved it. And so when the critics came and panned it, I start to think that all the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, all the movie critics that are paid professionally to do this in Variety, I feel like they're just geared to not like things. They want to have that controversial take. I think even Jack Black came out and said, when we tested it, I'm paraphrasing here, but I think he said when they tested the movie, everyone loved it. So when it came out, he was kind of surprised at the reaction being negative to such a happy, positive movie. But I think that's just the critics being the critics. I think anyone that you go up to, I haven't heard too many negative things, but anyone who's seen it, I think really enjoys it. And honestly, it's just a nice, different flavor of a movie, compared to the onslaught of comic book movies that we get on a yearly basis now. But yeah, happy Mario Day. Today on the podcast, we're talking, if we want to transition a little bit, today on the podcast, we're going to be focusing mostly on spring training. We're going to be focusing mostly on some pitching injuries that have been kind of sweeping the nation, and and also a Billy Joel video that I just ended up seeing a little bit late to the party on that is kind of blowing my mind technologically about how they did it, and it kind of scares me a little bit. But first, before we get going, really, you can find the podcast again on Apple Podcasts. You can also find our shorts and previous episodes on our YouTube channel at youtube.com @Powell Not Found. You'll go straight to the channel right there. And so go ahead and hit the like button, comment, subscribe, do all the things that you need to do on YouTube in order to help grow the channel. This weekend, I ended up watching, before we get into the pitching injuries, I ended up watching the Billy Joel video for Turn the Lights Back On. Earlier last month, Billy Joel released a new song, and it was the first song he had released in about 30 years. I think the last music he released was in an album was The River of Dreams back in the mid-90s, I want to say, maybe early 2000s. And at first, didn't like the song. I think the first time I heard it, I was like, oh, it sounds very stereotypical Billy Joel. And the more and more I heard it, the more anthemic it became, and the more trapped in my head that it was, and how self-reflecting the song is. To me, clearly this song is basically an anthem about how he dropped songwriting for 30 years and disappeared after the River of Dreams album. Obviously, he was doing his residency in Madison Square Garden, so he was still around. You could still get tickets and go to a concert and see all the songs. But it was a Billy Joel of a generation ago. For the vast part of 30 years, you didn't see his face pop up. I think there was a live single at one point that he released that was, nothing special. But the more and more you dig into the song, the more and more you realize about how he wrote this song, how he kind of, by happenstance, met a record producer in his 30s who convinced Billy Joel to keep writing and he collaborated with him and he made this song, the more interesting this song gets. The song, if you haven't heard it, and I can't play it obviously for copyright reasons, but is basically, like I said before, I think it's a double meaning about a relationship that has kind of lost its luster, and now, the subject in the song has found that passion again. But also, it sounds like basically an ode to his songwriting, how he stopped and then came back to it. And it's a beautiful melody. It will get stuck in your head. Billy Joel's voice sounds amazing in it. It sounds just like he used to. Maybe there's a little bit of grovel there for a guy who hasn't put down a record in 30 years, but it pretty much sounds exactly the same. It takes you back to any of the old classic Billy Joel songs that you're used to remembering. And because of this song, I kind of went back, listened to The Stranger, listened to Glass Houses, his previous albums. And if someone was to tell me, hey, this song came straight from Glass Houses or The Stranger, I'd say, yeah, it certainly did. Sounds exactly like it would have been back then. The one thing that's really interesting about this song in particular is when it came out, I don't believe the video was released. I think 9 or maybe 7, 8, 9 days later, they released a music video to accompany this song, and it was Billy Joel at a piano, as an older man, and as the camera swoops and it moves on the jib, Billy Joel gets younger. And you're looking at 1970s Billy Joel, then you're looking at the 80s Billy Joel, 90s Billy Joel, and he ages, and he goes back in time and they de-age him, kind of similar to how they de-aged Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones. This technology is not only a little bit scary, but I don't know how they do it. Like, obviously there's some sort of AI involved. They had a behind-the-scenes video that accompanied this song as well. I thought they were going to kind of go into basically how they kind of did that with the technology, but it ended up kind of being more of a puff piece about their relationship and how they got this song together, him and the record producer. So you can see that on the Billy Joel channel. But I'm more interested in basically how they de-aged him and what kind of computer program they're using and how they get this to be possible. Because in my mind, I immediately go to like video games where they mocap people and they digitally put faces on them. Maybe they did that with Billy Joel. It doesn't look like they did that, nor do I think that Billy Joel would have the patience to do something like that. But yeah, I watched the video and then watched the behind the scenes video that accompanies that on the Billy Joel YouTube channel. It's really interesting. It's freaky technology, but it is such a good video that really kind of reinforces that this song is about his songwriting. Right? Why else would they go back to those eras of Billy Joel's life like that? They intersplice the end of the video with some real footage of him back and forth in the studio, and that must be really weird and self-reflective as the artist to kind of see all those moments kind of stitched together in this dramatic way. But it's a great, great video, and also a very interesting last 6 months for music. Billy Joel releases a song for the first time in 30 years. The Beatles release Now and Then, their first single in about 30 years since the anthology. Also, the main writer of the composition has been dead for 50 years. At this point, I'm waiting for Beethoven to release a new single. At this point, technology has promised me that this could possibly happen. But what a cool little era for music, using technology in a way to elicit different kind of feelings and emotions. The Beatles one, even though the song itself Now and Then is a little bit somber, to hear peak John Lennon voice again in a different context is fantastic. It's great. What they did with Peter Jackson and reviving that song is using technology in a good way. This video using that de-aging stuff and I'm assuming AI technology, that's using AI in a good way for artistry's benefit. Everything else, regulated. With that, let's move on to the song of the week before we get into the pitching injuries today, because what a better segue than to talk about Billy Joel, Paul McCartney, than to talk about my own music and to talk about a song called Benefit of the Doubt. This song, Benefit of the Doubt, for the song of the week, it's funny listening back to this song. It sounds a little bit less produced, but to me, it was the first time I really wrote a rocker outside of Lovely Laura that I could get behind. And you can hear the lo-fi quality of it in the track, but to me, it was a strong enough melody and a fun song that I figured I would make it the title track of my album back in 2018, the Benefit of the Doubt album. This was recorded in a studio apartment in Hoboken. I'm sure all my neighbors really appreciated me doing a number of takes to try to get this right. It includes a duplicated sample for percussion, because at the time there was no way for me to get drums into the track without kind of using MIDI keys, and that was not something I was kind of interested in. But without further ado, let's hear the Benefit of the Doubt. I'm just going to push on the waiting screen here. This is the song of the week, The Benefit of the Doubt, from the Benefit of the Doubt album. Here you go.
We crash, we burn, our words, they shoot through the sky just like a comet does. We yell and scream and lay our love on the line till we let it burn. You were standing at my door as I pace the kitchen floor. You know, I find there's never ever gonna be a right time. And by the time you look up and realize it's a lifetime, I guess I'm living in the past. Glimpses went so fast. What am I supposed to do? 'Cause I never gave you the benefit of the doubt.
That was the benefit of the doubt by myself, Powell Not Found, off of the 2018 album of the same name. Listening back to that, you can just definitely hear all the, hear a lot of the mistakes, but you can hear just how fresh and fragile the recording was as I kind of tried to experiment with different kind of things like samples, or just kind of like background vocals, how full a track can get just by putting some background vocals onto it, and how beatly it can sound in a hurry. I love that track just for the different harmonies. Listening to it back again, I just want to re-record it, make it sound a lot better than what it was in a Hoboken apartment. But again, you can find that track at Powell Not Found, Powell Not Found's Bandcamp at powellnotfound.bandcamp.com. Let's move on a little bit to a topic I wanted to talk about to close out the show. Again, this is going to be a short and sweet one. I started watching spring training, and the overwhelming feeling after watching about 2 or 3 innings of spring training baseball is, why would anybody spend time watching spring training baseball? Oh my God, it is boring. There are prospects, but these games mean nothing. There are people freaking out on Twitter, online, that Giancarlo Stanton is not hitting enough in spring training. There are people freaking out online that Aaron Judge, the home run leader, is not swinging and hitting enough baseballs and getting enough hits in spring training. These games don't matter. These games are rough drafts. They're rough sketches. They are the first storyboards of the season. But these games should not be telecast. Like, they're practice runs, if anything, of getting people reps, getting people trying different things. I don't think anybody should take any kind of analysis out of spring training unless you're a player who's trying to make the team. Then those numbers might have some significance. But if you're a veteran player who's going to be on the starting roster, and I'm talking about Anthony Rizzo, I'm talking about DJ LeMahieu, I'm talking about Jose Trevino. Okay, you can pretty much ignore all their numbers. Everything's about just getting ready for that first game, because once that first game starts, they'll turn a switch on, and it will mean something. But to analyze people's performances in spring training is the biggest waste of effort and time, because you don't know what they're working on. You don't know what they're feeling. You don't know what kinks they're working out. So a home run is a home run, but it doesn't really mean anything because they're not really working on all cylinders. You know, no one's going to judge when Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery sign. No one's going to judge their first start when they haven't been at spring training for about 3 weeks, right? They're getting into their reps right now. So to anybody trying to get MLB.TV as a subscription, wait until the season starts, because all of this stuff beforehand, just not interesting. Just not interesting. If it doesn't count, it's not interesting. And plus, the way that MLB even uses the month of April is just like an extended spring training. I mean, nothing drives me more insane than watching pitchers only go 5 innings or only go 60 pitches because they're not ramped up enough. They've been ramping up for a month and a half. How did they not ramp up to 100 pitches? Which kind of leads to this next story of from Ken Rosenthal in The Athletic. The prominent MLB team physician sounds alarm on pitching injuries. Now, the vast majority of this article goes into the fact that finally people are starting to realize, hey, these pitchers are getting Tommy John a lot. And they're getting injured a lot. And nothing that these teams seem to be doing, and the Yankees are the worst offender of this, trying to say that we're working a lot on injury prevention, we're giving people days off. They're very vocal about that, but nothing seems to be working. And this article kind of goes into the ins and outs of how high velocity and these pitchers trying to attain these insane numbers are getting hurt more often. When you're throwing 99 to 100 every single pitch and your only emphasis is velo, you start to you start to kind of get a little bit upset. You start to get a little bit you start to get injured. You start to really realize that like these pitchers only have a limited time frame to do their stuff before they're inevitably going under the knife and getting surgery. This wasn't, and not to be old baseball fan, but didn't seem to be an issue in the 90s, in the early 2000s. Now, pitchers were throwing, from today's standards, insane amount of pitches. There is a World Series game from 2000 where Al Leiter, I think, throws 134, 145 pitches before he's taken out in the 8th inning or 9th inning. He's trying to complete the game. That kind of baseball will not happen anymore. You see pitchers taken out right at 100, 101. Very rarely do you see a complete game anymore. Pitchers are treated with kitchen gloves on. They're treated very, very carefully. Yet they're still getting injured. Justin Verlander starting the season this year on the IL. This is coming after 2 years ago getting Tommy John surgery, coming back, but he's still injured again. In this article, they talk about Jacob deGrom, who unfortunately has become the symbol of high-velocity throwers that are constantly hurt. And the article goes into why would Major League Baseball spend this kind of money on these kind of breakable assets? It's like spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on a Fabergé egg and giving it to a whole bunch of children and saying, don't break it. It's going to break. As a former pitcher myself, I'm not saying a major league pitcher, obviously, but as a person who used to throw many, 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 many pitches, and I don't exactly have rotator cuff problems or elbow problems or shoulder problems or whatever, I want to say I feel like they've conditioned these guys. They've conditioned these guys to get hurt. This is a Major League Baseball problem. This is the way that they look at what is quality. And it's a battle between what the analytics say that is important and what is actually important. Later on in this article, one of the, I think it's the physician. Let me check here. So I don't get this wrong. The physician that basically is highlighted in this article says something about pitchers not knowing at this point about how to pitch. All they're chasing is high velocity fastballs. And I'm here to tell you as a fan, I'm sick of seeing these flamethrowers throw 104 miles per hour, and then when it comes to big pitches and big games, they fail because batters can get around on it. If they can flick a bat on it, that 104 mile per hour fastball can become 122 miles per hour going into the left field bleacher seats. I'm looking at you, Aroldis Chapman, during the playoffs. These flamethrowers, it goes back to that saying that the people have been saying for a long time. These guys that are coming up, they only know how to throw hard. They don't know how to pitch. They're not Greg Maddux. They're not John Smoltz. They're not Al Leiter. They're not even Pedro Martinez, who was a flamethrower, but he knew how to pitch. Pedro Martinez, when you would look at him throw, the devastating thing wasn't his fastball. It was his changeup that he would mix in and get hitters off balance. That was the point. The point was not to throw 105 until your elbow requires so much reconstructive surgery that you're more machine than man. I think also it goes back to Major League Baseball only looking for a stereotypical thing. Major League Baseball has this kind of funny relationship with analytics, and they feel like they're very, very smart when it comes to who they should look at and what makes a good baseball player. Oh, high velocity off the bat, that's what makes a good hitter. No, a good hitter gets on base, regardless of the situation. A good hitter bunts down the line to get runners across in scoring position, regardless of the result for himself. A good hitter works the count. A good hitter protects the plate with 2 strikes. A good hitter does not go down like Joey Gallo would go down if there's a perfectly good fastball on the outside part of the plate and he'd be looking at it. Regardless of how quickly his bat speed is or how fast the ball comes off of his bat, he wasn't a good player. And I think people are starting to see that. But Major League Baseball, I think, has had the tendency to look at players of the same ilk, players of the same physicality. Like, when was the last time you saw a star player who was under 6 foot in Major League Baseball? Can you name one that's not called David Eckstein? They're looking at the same types of players, regardless. Physicality, if they're not getting people who could probably be stars to their team in front of them because they're locked into this mindset of this is what makes a good player. And then when the player gets too big, look at Aaron Judge, they make excuses that he's too big, that he can't field, his body will break down. I feel like the same thing's going to happen with Spencer Jones in the Yankees farm system. He's too big. He's got to work on his defense, service time manipulation, all that kind of stuff. They're going to hold him back because now his features are too big. I feel like baseball used to be a fun sport to watch because anybody and their brother could play. You look back at characters like Yogi Berra, Jackie Robinson, Babe Ruth, right? All very different guys, different in stature, but they all made contributions to the game. David Eckstein, Pedro Martinez weren't tall behemoths. They were just good players. They just knew how to play. El Guapo, Rich Garcia on the Red Sox, huge. You do see some elements of it in today's game, different physicalities. I mean, Daniel Vogelbach is probably not your physical specimen, that you're looking for in an athletic player, but he can hit. Prince Fielder, it's the same one, same type. John Kruk. And the reason I bring this up is because this is the problem with pitchers. They're looking at one metric, which is high velocity, and they're passing people through. They talk about how if you don't throw 99 miles per hour, you're not going to get drafted. And to me, if you're a team in a smaller market and you're looking to find an edge, there's your edge. If you're trying to battle analytics and battle payroll, your edge is to find the players that can play the game that everybody's overlooking. And everybody at this point is overlooking the pitchers that are throwing 93, 92, 93 miles per hour, and they can pitch. They can locate. They can keep hitters off balance, but they don't throw 100 miles per hour. That's your edge that you got to look for. You got to look for players that instead of high velocity off the bat when they're in the batter's box, you got to look for players that can get on base no matter what the situation, that are smart, that maybe don't fit the physical specimens of a Giancarlo Stanton, a physical manifestation of just a athletic person. That's the edge that you got to be looking for with these teams. And the fact that none of them are looking that way is kind of, you start to wonder how many people are undrafted that are just great players. How many people are toiling away just because they don't fit, they don't check a box with the analytics. It's just sad to think about. Great article though on The Athletic. Go check it out if you have time. It just reminded me of what I felt like all along, is that these pitchers are being conditioned. These pitchers are being put in situations that are going to make their bodies break. When I was younger, I used to go and practice. I used to throw hundreds of pitches, right, to my detriment. And even back then, I heard the same mantra over and over again. Oh, you shouldn't throw that many pitches. Your arm is going to get worn out. Your shoulder is going to get hurt if you throw that many pitches. Don't throw a curveball, was said by many, many, many of my coaches, because you're going to hurt your arm. Did it anyways. I didn't have anything to lose. I didn't have $1 million contract. playing up in icy New Hampshire. But now, I think you look at basically the results that people are getting from conditioning these pitchers to not throw 100 pitches, giving them the proper days and rests off, looking at the data. They're getting hurt anyways. So clearly something's wrong in the way that they're conditioning these players. You'd think that they would go back to the 80s where they would say, okay, well, what was working then? And say, if you're going to invest millions of dollars, if the Mets are going to invest millions of dollars in Verlander and Scherzer before they traded them away, you think that maybe they would say, hey, at an older age, you probably know what you're doing because you got here. But someone like the Dodgers, scratch the Mets. I mean, the Mets, that was a different situation. But if you're looking at someone like the Dodgers with like Yamamoto coming over, would you invest that much money in a pitcher if you know that eventually they're going to break because of the way that you guys condition? Why not change the way they condition these pitchers from a young age? They're saying they're seeing pitchers come up through the leagues that haven't made the major leagues that are already getting Tommy John surgery before they even make the majors? You're telling me a kid that's less than 20 years old is coming into minor league camp already past his first Tommy John surgery? I'm sorry, at that point, if you require surgery to play a game, maybe you should change your tactic. Maybe you should throw a little less hard and learn how to pitch. And their argument in this article is that you won't get drafted. And I'm saying that the smart team will start to draft those players. The smart team will stop looking at an Aroldis Chapman type profile who throws 104 down the strike zone, and will start looking for smart Greg Maddoxy, post Greg Maddux when he was throwing in the 90s, players. That's what I think. And this has been the most interesting story that's come out of spring training since the see-through pants incident. Anyways, moving on to just wrapping up a couple different things before we wrap up the show, because we're at about 38 minutes. We've got Josh Donaldson has announced his retirement. We've got a couple injuries as well to the Yankees, but we'll probably skip that for now. But Josh Donaldson, 13 years in the major leagues, played 2 seasons with the Yankees, and those are the 2 seasons that I saw. Josh Donaldson had an MVP with the Blue Jays, smacking more than 40 homers that season. Had a couple good seasons with Minnesota, but came over in the Gio Urshela and Gary Sanchez trade a couple years ago from the Minnesota Twins, and the Yankees received Josh Donaldson, and they received IKF, and IKF ended up being that utility guy, played shortstop for a bit, but Josh Donaldson was supposed to be the solution at third base for the Yankees, and at the time was supposed to be the edge to the Yankees teams that needed a serious edge. And it didn't end up working. It ended up being probably one of the not an ideal trade for the team. In retrospect, it ended up clogging a third base hole that probably should have been filled by DJ LeMahieu the whole time. There was a lot of playing time issues. There was a lot of off days for Josh Donaldson. He was plagued with injuries. I think he was phantom IL'd one time. He was the one that I mentioned a couple weeks ago that was playing batting practice the day after he was announced with a hamstring injury. So there was a lot of funky business with Josh Donaldson on the team. Not a lot of also a kind of a media incident with Tim Anderson, I believe, during his tenure here. It wasn't a very good fit with the New York Yankees. His release from the team last year ended up kind of freeing that third base hole to see players like Peraza, like Cabrera in there from time to time, and seeing LeMahieu at the place where he probably should have been in the first place. With Glaber kind of clogging up that second hole, kind of freed DJ LeMahieu to be an everyday player, but with injuries that didn't kind of come to pass. But with Josh Donaldson in there, especially with him not really at his MVP-like level, ended up kind of being a little bit of a down note for the New York Yankees. But still, a good 13-year career. I think he finishes up here with his career stats being, let's see, career stats. I mean, 1,300 hits, 1,310 hits, 279 home runs, and a 261 batting average, which all in all is a pretty good career. 279 home runs than I have. So, but in my defense, I haven't gotten around to it yet. Yankees just haven't called yet. But anyways, that's going to do it for the show this week. Next week, we'll probably start talking a little bit more entertainment. I want to wish a happy Mario Day to everybody who's celebrating March 10th today. And again, thank you guys for listening to the podcast. You can find the podcast at Apple Podcast. Go ahead and follow the show there. You can also find us at the YouTube channel, Powell Not Found. And thank you guys all for listening / enduring, depending on where you fall on that spectrum, to the Powell Not Found podcast. Thank you guys. I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.